The morning after felt heavier than any failure I'd ever known. The air itself seemed to remember everything I had lost. My project, my dream, was gone. Undone not by anyone else's cruelty, but by my own rush, my own blindness to what I didn't yet know. It wasn't a cruel ending, it was a mirror. For months, I had lived inside that dream. Late nights, endless plans, all the energy of someone certain they were unstoppable. But I wasn't building on steady ground. I wanted results faster than wisdom could grow. I wanted success louder than my own self-awareness. And when weakness arrived, when doubt whispered that I didn't know enough, I tried to drown it with more noise, more work, more pretending, until the noise stopped on its own. One day, the call came. The project was closed. The investors moved on. My inbox was a museum of good intentions. That night, I sat at the table with my hands flat against the surface, feeling the tremor of everything that had fallen through them. I didn't cry right away. I just stared at the cracked mug beside me, the one I'd used every morning of that journey. It had a thin scar along the side, like something quietly broken but still capable of holding warmth. I think that mug knew before I did. The dream wasn't ending, it was being reshaped. In the silence that followed, I remembered Viktor Frankl's words. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. I could no longer fix what had collapsed, but I could still decide who I wanted to be in the ruins. That morning, I made coffee in the same cracked mug. I sat by the window as the light crept across the floor. I didn't rush to plan, or promise, or prove. I just breathed. I let the grief sit beside me like an old teacher. It wasn't here to punish me. It was here to educate me. And slowly, lesson by lesson, the meaning began to surface. The first lesson: strength is not speed. I used to believe that if I wasn't moving fast, I was falling behind, but I see now. Speed without understanding is another form of delay. The universe does not reward impatience. It rewards alignment. The second lesson: ignorance can be holy if you let it teach you. I used to hide my lack of knowledge, pretending confidence would compensate for depth. Now I know that humility is the foundation of mastery. When you admit what you don't know, the right teachers appear. The third lesson: every collapse is a redirection. I had been forcing a version of my dream that no longer fit my growth. Its fall was a form of mercy, a way to return me to the truth I'd been neglecting. That success is not about control, but connection. So I began again, not from ambition, but from awareness. I reread the books I had once skimmed: Frankl, Hill, Dispenza, and even The Secret. This time not as magic, but as mindset. I started journaling, not about goals, but about gratitude. I noticed how my thoughts shaped my day. The law of attraction isn't only about wishing, it's about becoming the kind of person who can receive what they seek. Each morning, I practiced this simple ritual. I touched the crack in the mug, whispered, "Thank you for what you taught me," and then wrote one sentence beginning with, "I am becoming." Sometimes the words were small. I am becoming patient. Other days they were strong. I am becoming wise enough to wait for what's mine. With time, the shame dissolved into understanding. I stopped measuring my worth by the size of my achievements and started measuring it by the steadiness of my spirit. I learned to respect failure as part of education. The dream that once collapsed began to rebuild quietly, not as a monument this time, but as a path. And every step on that path felt lighter, because now I knew what I hadn't before: that endings are not enemies, they are invitations. I still keep the cracked mug by my window. The light finds it every morning, gliding along its imperfect line. It reminds me that healing is not about erasing what happened, it's about using it. This is not the end of my story. This is the pause before the next beginning. And when I look at the mug, I remember, standing up isn't proof you never fell. It's proof you still believe there's more ahead. There's a strange quiet that follows loss. It doesn't shout, it lingers, softly, persistently, like fog that refuses to lift even when the sun insists. After the dream collapsed, I thought I could simply move on. But the truth is, I didn't yet know what moving on meant. I kept telling people I was fine. I rehearsed it like a line in a play. I'm fine, really, just taking time to reset. But inside, I was anything but fine. The silence after a dream ends feels like free fall. All the noise that once defined you, the messages, the meetings, the praise, disappears. And in that absence, you start to hear a deeper voice, one that isn't impressed by achievement or afraid of failure. That voice asks me questions I didn't want to answer. Who are you without the title? What were you chasing so hard that you forgot to live? What have you been avoiding by staying busy? For weeks, I avoided those questions. I stayed up too late scrolling through social media, comparing my ruins to someone else's highlight reel. Every success I saw felt like a personal reminder of what I'd lost. I told myself I was learning, that I was researching. In truth, I was numbing. Then, one morning, I noticed the mug again, the same cracked one sitting quietly by the window. A thin beam of light had found its scar, turning it gold for just a second. I felt something stir in me, something honest. That mug had survived the same collapse I had. It was fragile, yes, but still capable of holding warmth. Maybe that was me too. That was when I began to understand the law of polarity. The idea that every negative holds the seed of its positive opposite. Pain and possibility are twins. They just take turns being noticed.
Without night, we'd never honor sunrise.
Without failure, we'd never meet humility. Without loss, we'd never rediscover what truly matters. In my case, loss was the invitation to look inward. I'd spent years building things outside of myself, projects, connections, identities, but I hadn't built the person inside. My dream didn't fall apart because the world was cruel. It fell apart because my foundation couldn't hold its weight yet. That realization didn't shame me. It freed me. Growth doesn't always sound like victory. Sometimes it sounds like silence finally telling you the truth. I began to write again. Small notes, nothing fancy. I made a list of what the collapse had forced me to see. I had been chasing validation, not purpose. Might have been busy, not fulfilled. Might have been proving, not creating. Reading that list was painful, but also clarifying. It was as if I'd been driving with fogged windows, and now, for the first time, I could see the road ahead. The law of attraction teaches that what we focus on expands. Frankl, in his own way, said the same. Meaning arises from where we place our attention, even in suffering. Together, those truths became my compass. If my thoughts were the seeds, then my awareness was the gardener. So I began tending to my inner garden carefully. When fear appeared, I didn't try to crush it. I acknowledged it like an old friend who had stayed too long. You can sit, I'd say to my fear, but you don't get to drive. And something in me softened. I learned that peace doesn't mean never feeling pain. It means no longer mistaking pain for identity. There were still days when I woke up feeling lost. Days when motivation hid under the covers with me. But even then, I noticed the difference. I no longer believed the heaviness was permanent. I understood that energy moves. Emotions pass through if we stop trapping them with judgment. The cracked mug became a kind of meditation.
I pour my morning coffee and watch how light gathered in its imperfection.
Every reflection reminded me that beauty isn't in flawlessness, it's in survival. The mug wasn't trying to be what it once was. It was teaching me how to hold both the wound and the warmth at once. Fred Rogers might have said, "It's okay to feel this way." And Oprah would add, "And even now, you can begin again." So that's what I did. I began with small things. I opened the window. I took 10 slow breaths. I whispered gratitude for one detail I hadn't noticed yesterday. The sound of birds, the smell of rain, the way the mug fit perfectly in my hands. Each small act was a stitch pulling me back toward wholeness. The world hadn't ended. It had only paused to ask me, what will you create now that you finally know yourself? You don't find meaning after pain. You make meaning inside it. And maybe that's what the dream had been trying to teach me all along. The silence wasn't a punishment. It was an invitation. And if I could learn to listen, maybe I'd find a truer sound waiting inside the quiet. It happened on an ordinary afternoon. I was washing the same cracked mug, my mind half somewhere else, thinking about what I'd lost, what I should have done, all the tired refrains of regret. My hands were wet, the soap slippery. Then it happened. The mug slipped from my grasp and hit the edge of the sink. The sound was sharp, small, and final. When I looked down, I saw it split in two. For a long moment, I just stared. It wasn't anger I felt. It was silence, thick, ringing, like the world had exhaled with me. The mug that had survived everything, the one I kept using as proof that I was still okay, had finally broken. I could have cried. I could have sworn. But instead, something inside me whispered, maybe it's time. That whisper was gentle but undeniable. I dried my hand slowly. I picked up the pieces carefully, noticing how the break was clean, almost graceful.
The edges met like they were meant to fit again, just differently.
I realized I'd been trying to glue my old life back together exactly as it was, refusing to see that maybe the break was what would let the light in. In that moment, something shifted. It wasn't dramatic, no thunder, no grand revelation, just a quiet clarity, like fog lifting from glass. For the first time in months, I stopped asking, why did this happen to me? And began asking, what if this happened for me? That question changed everything. The law of cause and effect teaches that every thought, every feeling sends out a signal, a cause that draws an effect back. Up until then, my thoughts had been soaked in self-blame and loss. I was vibrating on the frequency of defeat, expecting more of the same. But when I looked at those two broken halves, I saw something different. Proof of continuation. The mug hadn't vanished. It had transformed. So had I. I sat down at the table, the pieces beside me. My heart was calm in a way it hadn't been since everything fell apart. I whispered to myself, I'm not losing life. I'm redirecting it. I am a magnet for aligned opportunities. At first it felt awkward to say aloud, but I said it again and again. The words began to feel like warmth moving through my chest. I could sense something awakening, a soft but certain pulse of power that had been waiting beneath the rubble. I didn't know it then, but that was my first act of creation after collapse. That one shift in language, from loss to redirection, was the seed of every good thing that would follow. Every shift in thought begins to rearrange the outer world. That evening, instead of scrolling through reminders of what I wasn't, I opened a blank page in my notebook. At the top I wrote, who am I becoming? Not, what do I want, or how will I fix this? Just that single question. And under it, I wrote the first true answer that came to mind. I am becoming someone who chooses meaning over noise. It wasn't eloquent, but it was real. The next day, I bought a small tube of ceramic glue. I didn't rush to fix the mug. I just placed the pieces on my desk where I could see them, a reminder that rebuilding begins with willingness, not perfection. Each time I walk by, I touch one piece and think, you're still beautiful, even now. I realized that if I could speak that way to a cup, maybe I could start speaking that way to myself. That's when the law of attraction began to make sense in practice. Not as fantasy or instant manifestation, but as energetic alignment. My thoughts were quieting, my emotions were softening, and life was responding in kind. In the weeks that followed, I started receiving messages I hadn't expected. People I hadn't heard from in years checking in. Small job offers that matched my heart instead of my ego. Nothing huge, but each one felt like a wink from the universe saying, see, you're shifting. And perhaps the most healing part was this. I stopped needing to prove my worth to anyone. The collapse had stripped me bare, but in that nakedness, I found truth. The mug would never look the same again. Neither would I. But maybe that was the point. The break is not the end of the story. It's the place where the light decides to enter. I sat by the window that night, holding the two halves together in my palms. The crack gleamed softly in the lamplight, and in that quiet glow, I understood. I hadn't lost my dream. I'd just outgrown its shape. And this was the sound of something new beginning to breathe. That night, I placed the two halves of the mug on my desk and turned off the lights. The window reflected my face between them. One image, two fragments. It struck me then. Meaning wasn't something I would find outside this room. It was something I would have to create within it. For months I had been looking for external proof that I was still valuable. New projects, new plans, something to silence the ache. But nothing landed because I was still vibrating with the same energy that built the collapse. Urgency, fear, pride. The universe doesn't answer fear, it mirrors it. I was calling for healing while speaking the language of panic. That realization was the beginning of wisdom. Viktor Frankl once wrote, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. That single idea changed the architecture of my thoughts. The law of correspondence says the outer world reflects the inner. Frankl's insight explains why. The energy we choose inside that space, between what happens and how we respond, builds the shape of what happens next. So I began practicing the space. When anxiety arrived, I didn't fight it. I noticed it, breathed into it, gave it form. I would whisper, this is fear, not fate. I would sit quietly until the storm softened. Sometimes it took minutes, sometimes hours, but each time I chose awareness over reaction, I felt a thread of control return. Not over circumstances, but over my own frequency. That was the missing piece all along. Control isn't about managing outcomes, it's about mastering alignment. Peace doesn't come from fixing the world. It comes from tuning your inner world until it hums with truth. Once I understood that, even small tasks became sacred. Washing the dishes wasn't just cleaning, it was creating order inside chaos. Walking outside wasn't just exercise, it was a conversation with life. Every breath, every action became a vote for the energy I wanted to live in. I started seeing evidence of this everywhere. When I approached the day with calm, people responded with ease. When I greeted strangers with gratitude instead of hurry, kindness came back in unexpected ways. The law of attraction wasn't magic, it was mathematics. What I radiated returned to me. Frankl called this meaning through responsibility.
He believed the purpose of life is not to chase happiness,
But to find meaning in how we respond to what is asked of us. The law of attraction is its emotional twin. It asks us to embody the energy of what we desire, not just wish for it. Together, they form a compass, one rooted in action, the other in vibration. Every morning, I practiced a 2-minute ritual. Before opening my phone or checking messages, I sat with my notebook and wrote one line beginning with, "I am becoming." Sometimes it was, "I am becoming patient." Sometimes, "I am becoming calm." Over time, those sentences became mirrors of who I truly was, not who I used to prove myself to be. The outer world began to catch up with the inner one. I got a call about a new collaboration, not grand but aligned. A friend reconnected to share an opportunity that actually matched my values. These weren't coincidences, they were reflections. Life doesn't hand you meaning. It echoes it back once you start living as if you already have it. I realized, too, that gratitude is a frequency, not a feeling. You can thank life in advance for things unseen, and it will start arranging itself toward that thankfulness. Each time I did, I noticed subtle changes, better timing, easier decisions, fewer inner storms. Meaning, I learned, is not about understanding why something happened. It's about deciding what it will mean now. That choice, that deliberate shift of interpretation, turns pain into purpose. So I picked up the mug pieces again, ready to glue them. I didn't want them flawless. I wanted them honest. The glue line would be the proof that I had survived with awareness intact. When the two halves met and held, I whispered Frankl's words again. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space, I felt it. The quiet hum of alignment, like a tuning fork struck gently inside my chest. The mug wasn't just mended, it was meaningful. So was I. I used to think the dream would arrive when I finally found the perfect plan. Now I know. Dreams answer alignment before strategy. The law of attraction isn't wishful thinking. It's disciplined attention that quietly reshapes your reality. Here are the real reasons the dream starts coming towards you and how attraction powers each one. 1. Clarity of desire. The signal becomes clean when you name what you truly want. You stop broadcasting static. A clear intention is a frequency. Confusion is noise. The universe can't deliver to a moving target. Why it attracts. A precise, heartfelt picture trains your brain and your energy to notice aligned doors and ignore distractions. You magnetize matches and deflect misfits. Daily practice. Write a one-line intention each morning. I choose because it serves. Read it while holding the mended mug. Let the symbol remind you. Broken can still be useful. Clarity can be gentle. Clarity isn't loud, it's accurate. 2. Emotional alignment. You feel it before you see it. Desire without feeling is a request with no voltage. When your body feels the future as safe and possible, your choices begin to cooperate. Why it attracts. Emotion is the carrier wave of intention. Gratitude, calm, and quiet confidence broadcast ready, drawing experiences that confirm your readiness. Daily practice. 2 minutes of pre-feeling. Breathe, soften your jaw, and rehearse the feeling of having arrived. Steady, thankful, useful. Sip from the mug and let warmth teach your nervous system the new normal. 3. Identity shift. I am becoming replaces someday I'll be. You don't chase a dream. You become the person who lives it. Language matters. Why it attracts. Identity anchors behavior. The more often you speak from your becoming, the more actions line up with it. Cause meets effect. Daily practice. One sentence daily. I am becoming a patient, skilled, generous creator. Then one congruent act. 5 minutes. Tidy a file. Send a kind note.
Finish a micro task. Small proofs change big stories.
4. Consistent action. Faith with footsteps. Energy answers devotion, not desperation. Repetition is respect. Why it attracts. The law of action and the law of persistence compound your signal. Each tiny kept promise turns belief into evidence. Evidence stabilizes frequency. Daily practice. Pick a non-negotiable 5. 5 minutes writing. 5 follow-ups. 5 product improvements. Choose one lane and keep it. Track streaks. Honor misses without drama and begin again. 5. Environment design. Friction down, flow up. Willpower is precious. Save it for creation. Shape spaces that make good choices easy. Why it attracts. The law of correspondence. Outer mirrors inner. A clear desk, prepared tools, and supportive people reflect and reinforce your inner order. Order attracts opportunities that thrive in order. Daily practice. Night setup ritual. Lay out tomorrow's glass of water. Open your document to the next line. Place the mug where morning light finds its seam. Invite ease. 6. High quality input. What you ingest, you project. You become what you repeatedly consume. Voices, rooms, feeds. Why it attracts. Attention trains vibration. Uplifting books, humane mentors, and honest data recalibrate your baseline and raise what you broadcast. Daily practice. The 1-1-1 rule. 1 page of a nourishing book. 1 insight capture. 1 helpful outreach. Replace 10 minutes of doom scrolling with 10 minutes of craft. 7. Gratitude and service. Abundance finds a channel. Gratitude expands what it touches. Service keeps you open. Why it attracts. Gratitude tunes you to already enough, dissolving grasping energy. Service converts love into motion, opening pathways you couldn't plan. Daily practice. Evening ledger. 3 things that worked. 1 person you lifted. Send a thank you while you still feel it. 8. Surrendered timing. Trust the pace that protects you. Some delays are mercies wearing patience.
Why it attracts.
The law of polarity reframes not yet as not this. Letting go of anxious timelines removes resistance and keeps your field clear for the right fit. Daily practice. When impatience spikes, place your palm on the mug and say, right opportunities, right time. I am ready and I am guided. Return to 1 small task. 9. Courageous boundaries. Protect the signal. You can't broadcast clearly in a storm of other people's urgency. Why it attracts. Boundaries prevent leakage of energy and attention. A protected focus becomes a stronger magnet. Daily practice. Calendar guardrail. 1 protected hour daily labeled build. Phone in another room. 3 promises only. Keep them. 10. Meaning above ego. Purpose stabilizes power. When the dream serves more than your image, it endures. Why it attracts. Purpose purifies frequency. Work that helps becomes work that lasts and people feel it. Daily practice. Ask, who benefits if this succeeds? Do 1 act today that helps that person before you gain anything. The mended mug catches light as I finish writing. That seam is my reminder. Devotion over perfection. Attraction is not luck. It's a lived frequency. Clarity felt. Identity chosen. Actions kept. Timing trusted. Morning again. The air is soft, almost forgiving. I stand by the window holding the mended mug in both hands. The golden line that once marked its wound glows beneath the light. It doesn't hide the crack. It celebrates it. And somehow, that feels like a reflection of me. This is where the story circles back. Not to what was lost, but to what was found in the losing. The journey didn't give me back the same dream. It gave me a deeper one. A dream no longer driven by noise or pride, but by purpose and presence. The coffee is warm. The day feels new, but it's not the kind of new that demands excitement. It's quieter, grounded. It says, you don't have to rush. You just have to continue. When I look at the mug,
I remember the first day after the collapse, the silence,
the confusion, the fear that I'd ruined everything. I remember the heaviness of not knowing who I was without the title or the plan. And now, holding this repaired piece of ceramic, I realized something simple but extraordinary. The dream didn't die. It evolved into wisdom. There's a beauty in rebuilding, not because you erase the evidence of your mistakes, but because you turn them into texture. The gold along the mug seam isn't decoration. It's truth made visible. Every setback, every pause, every almost became part of the pattern that finally fits who I am now. I think about the law of divine oneness, that everything, every person, every event is connected, that nothing we live through is wasted. Even the moments that hurt us serve to open the path toward who we're meant to be. The collapse that once broke my confidence became the doorway to alignment. The people I met during my lowest moments brought lessons I couldn't have learned in success. The mistakes I made were not curses. They were instructions written in a different language. Frankl wrote that life never stops asking questions of us. It's our answers that create meaning. And now, after all the noise and striving, my answer is simpler. I choose to create, to serve, to grow in love instead of fear. The universe doesn't need you to be perfect. It needs you to be available. I'm available now, not desperate, not restless, just open. I know that what I radiate will return, so I radiate patience, gratitude, and quiet confidence. That's the vibration of someone who trusts timing, someone who has seen how endings can disguise beginnings. As I sip my coffee, I list the truths I want to carry forward. What's meant for me won't need to be forced. Actitioner matters, but alignment matters more. Effort can work hard without hurrying. Effort isn't a reward, it's part of creation. And every morning, I can begin again. I smile, not because everything is perfect, but because I no longer need it to be. The dream I once chased now feels closer, not as a goal, but as a companion. It walks beside me instead of ahead. The law of attraction has taught me this. The world mirrors your inner weather. When you live from peace, opportunities find you naturally. You don't have to shout your worth. You just have to live it quietly, consistently, lovingly. Outside, the city begins to stir. The same sounds as before. Footsteps, doors open, engines starting. But they don't sound like noise anymore. They sound like rhythm. The world hasn't changed. I have. I set the mug down on the windowsill. For a moment, the scene catches the light just right. Gold and soft and alive. That light feels like a promise. No matter how many times we break, something luminous waits inside the repair. Wholeness isn't what happens when nothing is broken. It's what happens when you decide to love every piece that still remains. I breathe deeply, letting the air fill every corner of me. There's no rush, just this morning, this light, this moment of gentle power. The dream continues, not as a destination, but as a way of living. And as I take one small step into the day, I whisper the words that have become my quiet prayer. I release what broke me. I keep what built me. I attract what matches my healed energy. The dream collapsed, yes, but I didn't. I rose through it. And now, the world rises with me.